She has been the woman who made America laugh. The face that could turn awkward silence into roaring applause, and the voice that somehow felt like family. But now, at 92, Carol Burnett has finally admitted something that fans, critics, and even fellow Hollywood legends had quietly suspected for years. And when you understand what she revealed, it changes the way you see not only her career, but the emotional cost of making the world laugh. For most of her life, Carol Burnett was seen as unbreakable. She danced, she sang, she fell down staircases, on purpose. She wore outrageous costumes, and she laughed louder than anyone else in the room. On television, she was fearless. She mocked herself, mocked Hollywood, and mocked the very industry that made her famous. Millions tuned in each week to watch her variety show, not just because it was funny, but because it felt honest. Carol Burnett didn't act above her audience. She acted like one of them. But behind the curtain, behind the famous ear tug she dedicated to her grandmother, behind the sketches that became television history, there was a truth Carol carried, quietly for decades. A truth that shaped her humor, fueled her empathy, and sometimes left her feeling deeply alone. To understand why her recent admission matters so much, you have to go back to where it all began. Carol Burnett did not grow up in comfort or stability. Her childhood was marked by hardship, poverty, and emotional uncertainty. Raised primarily by her grandmother in a small apartment, Carol witnessed struggles that most future television icons never experienced. Both of her parents battled alcoholism, and as a young girl, Carol learned very early how to read a room, how to sense emotional shifts, and how to use humor as a shield. Comedy for Carol was never just entertainment, it was survival. She learned that laughter could soften pain, that a joke could distract from fear, but making others smile could keep the darkness at bay, at least for a moment. This instinct followed her into adulthood, into Hollywood, and onto the stages where millions would eventually applaud her. As her career exploded, Carol Burnett became a symbol of joy. She won awards, broke barriers for women in comedy, and created a show that gave creative freedom to performers in a way television had rarely seen. On the surface, it looked like a dream life. Fame, success, admiration, and a place in entertainment history. But the truth, Carol has now openly admitted, is this. She spent much of her life hiding pain behind laughter, afraid that if she stopped being funny, she would disappear. For years, people suspected it. Fans noticed the emotional depth behind her comedy. Co-stars spoke quietly about how deeply sensitive she was. In Spaniel, Fran saw how hard she pushed herself to keep smiling, even when life became unbearably heavy. But Carol rarely spoke about it publicly, not because she wanted sympathy, but because she believed that her job was to lift others, no matter the cost to herself. At 92, with nothing left to prove, and no image left to protect, Carol Burnett has finally acknowledged what everyone long suspected, that comedy was her armor, and behind it, she often carried profound grief, fear, and vulnerability. One of the most painful chapters of her life involved motherhood. Carol adored her children, but she also faced a heartbreak no parent should ever have to endure. The loss of her daughter, two addiction-related complications, shattered her in ways words could never fully capture. For years, Carol remained largely silent about this pain, choosing to grieve privately while continuing to bring laughter to the world. In recent reflections, Carol admitted that during some of her most beloved performances, she was carrying unimaginable sorrow. Audiences laughed, unaware that the woman making them forget their troubles was struggling to survive her own. This realization has struck fans deeply, reframing old memories of her work with a new layer of respect and heartbreak. She has also admitted that there were moments she feared slowing down, not because she loved fame, but because performing gave her structure, purpose, and a reason to keep going when personal life felt overwhelming. Retirement wasn't scary because she didn't know who she was without television. It was scary because silence forced her to face emotions she had kept busy outrunning. Another long-suspected truth Carol finally confirmed is that she often felt underestimated. Even at the height of her success, though adored by audiences, she had to fight to be taken seriously as a creative force. Executives saw her as the funny woman, not always as the sharp mind behind the sketches, the timing, and the emotional intelligence that made them work. Rather than openly battling this perception, Carol did what she always did. She proved herself through excellence. She also admitted that her kindness, something fans have always celebrated, sometimes came at a personal cost. Carol Burnett rarely said no. She wanted to support young performers, protect her cast, and create a safe space in an industry known for cruelty. But that constant giving sometimes left her emotionally drained, a truth she'll only fully recognize later in life. What makes her admission so powerful is not that it reveals scandal or controversy, but that it reveals humanity. Carol Burnett is not confessing regret for making people laugh. She is acknowledging the price she paid to do it so consistently, so brilliantly, and so selflessly. In her 90s, Carol speaks with clarity and calm. She doesn't sound bitter. She sounds peaceful. She talks about forgiveness, about understanding her parents in ways she couldn't as a child, and about learning that vulnerability is not weakness. She admits that if she could speak to her younger self, she would tell her that it's okay to rest, okay to ask for help, and okay to not always be the strong one. Fans who hear these words feel closer to her than ever, because suddenly, the woman who made them laugh through their own hardships is sharing the same emotional language they understand. Pain, love, loss, resilience. Hollywood has changed dramatically since Carol Burnett first stepped onto a stage. Trends come and go. Stars rise and fall. But her legacy feels untouched by time because it was never built on perfection. It was built on authenticity, even when that authenticity was hidden behind comedy. Now, at 92, Carol Burnett has nothing to hide. She no longer needs to wear laughter as armor. And in finally admitting what everyone suspected, that her humor was born from pain and sustained by love, she has given the world one last profound gift. Truth. Not the kind of truth that shocks, but the kind that heals. The kind that reminds us that behind every smile may be a story, and behind every laugh may be a battle we never see. And perhaps that is why her admission feels so powerful now. Because in a world obsessed with image, Carol Burnett chose honesty. In an industry built on illusion, she chose reality. And in doing so, she proved once again why she is not just a legend of comedy, but a symbol of grace, courage, and emotional strength. At 92, Carol Burnett hasn't just admitted what everyone suspected. She has reminded us that laughter doesn't mean the absence of pain. Sometimes, it means the courage to live with it and still choose joy. For much of her career, Carol Burnett appeared unstoppable. Week after week, she stepped onto the stage with energy that filled entire living rooms across America. Her humor wasn't cruel or distant. It was warm, self-aware, and deeply human. She could make fun of herself better than anyone else. And in doing so, she made audiences feel safe. Safe to laugh, safe to be imperfect, safe to be human. But long before the fame, before the spotlight and standing ovations, Carol Burnett learned something most children should never have to learn so early. Life could be unstable. Love could be complicated, and laughter could become a shield. Raised by her grandmother because her parents struggled with alcoholism, Carol grew up in an environment filled with uncertainty. Money was scarce, emotional security was fragile. As a young girl, she learned to observe closely, to sense moods, to adapt. And somewhere along the way, she discovered that making people laugh could change the atmosphere in a room. It could soften tension. It could momentarily erase fear. That discovery didn't just shape her personality, it shaped her destiny. When Carol entered Hollywood, she brought that instinct with her. But success didn't come easily or quickly. She faced rejection, doubt, and the quiet message that women in comedy were expected to fit into narrow boxes. Instead of conforming, Carol created her own lane. She wasn't glamorous in the traditional sense. She was expressive, exaggerated, and fearless. And that's exactly what made her unforgettable. As her fame grew, so did the expectations. Millions tuned in to laugh. Networks depended on her. Cast members leaned on her leadership. The public saw her as endlessly joyful. And slowly, without realizing it, Carol Burnett became the emotional anchor for everyone else while rarely allowing herself to lean on anyone in return. Doesn't the truth she has now openly acknowledged, that she felt responsible for keeping the joy alive, even when her own heart felt heavy, that she believed being strong meant staying funny, and that for a long time, she feared that if she stopped making people laugh, she might lose her place. In the world, those close to her suspected it. They saw how deeply she felt things, how sensitive she was beneath the comedy, how a careless word or a moment of loss could affect her far more than she ever let on publicly. But Carol didn't talk about it then, not because she was hiding something shameful, but because she didn't want her pain to overshadow her purpose. One of the most devastating experiences of her life came later, when she lost her daughter. After years of battling addiction, it was a loss that changed Carol forever. No amount of success, applause, or love from fans could touch that kind of grief. Yet, even then, she carried herself with dignity and restraint. She didn't turn her pain into headlines. She didn't use it to reshape her public image. She grieved quietly, privately, and deeply. No, years later, Carol admitted that some of her most iconic performances were delivered while she was broken inside. That the smile audiences adored was sometimes held together by sheer will. That there were moments she walked off stage and felt an overwhelming emptiness, despite the applause echoing behind her. Another truth she finally acknowledged is how much pressure she placed on herself to never disappoint. Carol Burnett didn't just want to succeed, she wanted to protect everyone around her. Her cast, her crew, her audience. She worked tirelessly to create a positive environment in an industry that could often be harsh and unforgiving. That kindness became part of her legend, but it also became a quiet burden. She has admitted that saying no was difficult. Rest felt undeserved. Slowing down felt like letting people down. And for years, she measured her worth by how much joy she could give, rather than how much peace she allowed herself to feel. At 92, Carol speaks differently now. There is softness in her voice, but also clarity. She talks about looking back, and finally understanding that strength does not always mean endurance. Sometimes it means honesty. Sometimes it means allowing yourself to be seen, even when you are not at your best. She has also reflected on forgiveness of her parents, of the industry, and of herself. She understands now that her parents were fighting their own battles, that the industry's limitations were not a reflection of her value, and that her younger self did the best she could with what she knew at the time. What makes this moment so moving is that Carol Burnett is not rewriting her past with regret. She is embracing it with compassion. She doesn't deny the pain, but she also doesn't deny the joy. She recognizes that both existed at the same time, that laughter and sorrow often walked hand in hand throughout her life. Fans hearing her words now feel something powerful, gratitude mixed with tenderness. They realize that the woman who helped them through hard times was fighting her own battles quietly, without ever asking for applause for her strength. And instead of feeling sad, many feel inspired. And inspired by her resilience, inspired by her honesty. It's inspired by the idea that it's okay to be complex. Carol Burnett's legacy has always been about connection, about reminding people they are not alone, and then finally admitting what everyone suspected, that her humor was born from pain, shaped by a responsibility, and sustained by love. She has deepened that connection more than ever before. And now, too, Carol Burnett no longer needs to prove anything. She has already changed television history. But in this final chapter, she has done something just as meaningful. She has shown that even legends are human, that even the brightest smiles can hide storms, and that there is incredible power in telling the truth, even late in life. This is why her admission matters. Not because it reveals weakness, but because it reveals courage. The courage to stop performing, the courage to reflect, and the courage to let the world see the woman behind the laughter. At 92, Carol Burnett hasn't just confirmed what people long suspected. She has offered a quiet lesson that joy is often hard-earned, that kindness can be costly, and that laughter, at its deepest level, is not an escape from pain, but a way to survive it. Disclaimer: the content in this video is based on publicly available information, media sources, and opinions. It is created for entertainment and educational purposes only. We do not claim or guarantee that every detail is 100% accurate.